I can bring today is somewhere in between possibly where HIV is and where cardiac rehab and pulmonary rehab are, because we've been in our infancy now for a while, and we're just starting to have some large RCTs in this area. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. Okay, so firstly, what is the problem? So 3% of the NHS budget is spent on kidney failure services, with chronic kidney disease being the biggest spend, second only to cancer in adult patients. So 2/3 of patients with chronic kidney disease who are at end stage are on haemodialysis, and that's at a cost of £35,000 per patient per year. And the incidence of people starting haemodialysis has more than doubled in the last 10 years. And this is likely to be due to a high prevalence of cardiovascular disease risk factors, diabetes, hypertension, and then also sedentary behaviour and obesity in this population. So we've just heard about cardiac rehab and pulmonary rehab, so there is lots of evidence in other long-term conditions that exercise training can improve vascular health and can improve quality of life. And it can be used as a possible means in this population as well to possibly slow progression of kidney disease. I'm going to tell you about a study that we've been looking at in that. But also, sorry, that's actually got a little bit squashed together there, but increased function, increased weight loss, decreased fatigue, and increased quality of life in these patient groups. Okay, so there's been more than 35 years of research investigations in this area, so in patients with CKD, and lots of systematic reviews. So there's been a couple of Cochrane reviews in this area, and what we find is that the studies are characterised by small sample size and short duration, which means it's difficult to make any conclusions in terms of mortality or morbidity risk in relation to exercise training. And there's also been great variation in exercise prescription across all of these small studies, so it's difficult to, again, draw any conclusions. So a while back, I was one of the inaugural members of the British Renal Society Rehabilitation Network, and we did a survey out to the multidisciplinary team through the British Renal Society, and we asked them a whole load of questions about whether they thought exercise was important for patients with chronic kidney disease, and what they do in relation to dealing with patients in terms of prescribing physical activity or recommending physical activity or exercise. So we had 133 respondents, and I don't know how well you can see that, but we separated them out into nephrologists, so those are your medical workforce, the nursing workforce, which is the second biggest workforce, and then others, which are physios, occupational therapists, exercise scientists. And what we found is that actually 100% of everybody thought that exercise was important for patients with chronic kidney disease, and that it's important to recommend exercise and important for patients to have access to exercise. But if you look down here at the bottom, and again, I apologise that it's not clearer, you can see this is never. So you can see that 63% of nephrologists and 42% of nurses never do more than talk about exercise to patients, so they don't go any further, they don't refer on, they don't provide any type of written information or any exercise programs, and then the same in terms of having access for physical activity in their clinics. So these are some of the barriers. So the most important barrier that they felt was that there was money and funding to be able to provide exercise services for patients, a lack of time, and a lack of qualified personnel. So I'm one of very, very few renal physiotherapists in the UK, so very few renal units actually have somebody that's dedicated to provide exercise for patients with CKD. So let me talk about some of the exercise options for patients with chronic kidney disease. So similar to what's provided in cardiac rehab and pulmonary rehab, we set up at King's it was the first physio-led renal rehabilitation service, and we set this up just over 12 years ago now. We modelled it on cardiac rehab and pulmonary rehab. I think we took the best bits, I'd like to say we took the best bits of both. We run this here at King's. It's out in one of our community sites in East Dulwich. And you can see there's a couple of pictures, one of our patients, one of our physios in the class. And we take patients from referrals from all of the NDT, but we also have self-referrals, so patients can actually refer themselves. And we have this poster actually up in our phlebotomy room, so while patients are having their blood taken, they're like, oh, what's this? And we get loads and loads of referrals just from patients going to have blood taken. So what is it? It's, as I said, it's a physiotherapy-led service. It's an outpatient program. We offer it twice weekly, and we encourage once weekly home exercise. We run the classes on 4 days of the week, and that's to allow access for our hemodialysis patients. So the hemodialysis patients come in for three times a week for hemodialysis treatment. So we wanted to be able to give them an off dialysis day that they could come and do exercise training. We use motivational interviewing, so we just heard that how important it is to use behavioural therapy techniques to engage patients. So motivational interviewing completely changed once I trained in that, completely changed my practice, and possibly more so as a physio, where at university I was trained that, you know, this is the problem, this is the solution, tell the patients to do this 3 times and they're going to get better. And the frustration when patients come back and they haven't done it, and you're like, but you know that that's what you're supposed to be doing. So this has completely changed how I engage patients and how we do our class. We offer an individually tailored exercise program, so we don't offer a circuit program, and that's because we want to engage patients in what is their specific goals. So some patients come with wanting to lose weight, some patients come with wanting to improve function, and we feel it's important to be able to individually tailor the exercise program to what's needed. So this is published some time ago. This is just a pragmatic, looking at that pragmatic program, and you can see, I'm not going to go into it, but you can see we showed really big improvements in exercise capacity, improvements in self-reported ability from patients to be able to do more with in their daily routines, and also improvements in anxiety and depression with the program. So what we've subsequently done, and this is just in press at the moment in nephrology dialysis transplantation, and this is looking at, so this is a retrospective longitudinal analysis, so this is looking at our 12 years of data. So 757 patients. Over that time, we had 193 events, so 136 deaths. And there you can see, so looking at Kaplan-Meier survival analysis, we showed that we had 44% of referrals who we considered to be completers, so they came to more than 50% of sessions, and those patients who completed the sessions had a longer time to event than the patients who didn't complete. And then patients who exceeded, so actually improved their exercise capacity by more than 50 metres at their reassessment. You can see here that they again had a much longer time to event than those patients who didn't improve by that amount of distance. When we looked at multivariate analysis, and we accounted for some of the baseline measures, including baseline level of fitness, we showed that the non-completers had a 1.6-fold greater risk of a combined event. And when looking at the change in incremental shuttle walk tests, so exercise capacity, we showed that non-responders had a 40% greater risk of a combined event. So we think this is quite good data to show that the program is worth doing, but what we'd like to do now is to follow this up with a randomized controlled trial so we can look at it in that environment. So we have used one of the things just to mention is when we looked at our renal rehab program and we looked at dropouts, one of our biggest dropouts was our hemodialysis population, because it's possibly just a little bit too far to expect patients that already come 3 times a week to come in another 2 times a week to come and do exercise. So I'm going to park them for a minute and tell you what we do with them. But I had a look during my PhD. I did an NIHR doctoral research fellowship, and I looked at pre-dialysis patients, so patients before dialysis, and I also looked at kidney transplant patients. So when we looked at a small cohort, so as a pilot RCT with just 20 patients, and we looked at a combined exercise training program, so we got half the group to exercise for 12 months, combined aerobic and resistance training, and half the group were our usual care group. We only had 2 dropouts, which was great, and those were only because they emigrated to America, one of them, and the other one started dialysis, so wasn't eligible to stay in the study. And what we actually showed, and again, this is very, very small, but we're actually looking at a bigger study than this at the moment, and what we showed is actually there was a between-group difference in kidney function of 5.16 mils per minute per year. So you can see our rehab group actually improved a little bit in terms of their kidney function in comparison to the usual care group. Very, very small numbers, but we found that quite exciting. And again, when looking at VO2 peak, you can see that there was a between-group difference there of 5.7 mils per kg per minute. And what was quite worrying for us is that, as you can see, the usual care group actually ended up being quite low. They were under our 17.5 mils per minute per kg cutoff, which is a study that was done by Sitsima in this population that showed that there's a survival disadvantage when starting dialysis if you have a VO2 peak below 17.5 mils. So not doing anything with this population is perhaps quite concerning as well. This is one of my things I'm very interested in, so arterial stiffness, we measure pulse rate velocity, and what we've shown with this is that doing the exercise training possibly improves arterial stiffness as well. Okay. Just briefly, we did a study as well looking at this in kidney transplant patients, and again using the same type of thing but doing 12 weeks of rehab, so using our renal rehab program. And then one of my master's students, Ellen Castle, she did a follow-up study. So we looked at the 12 weeks, so beginning to end, and then we looked again at post-exercise 9 months later. And what we showed was that, again, pulse wave velocity improved in both the resistance training and aerobic training groups when compared to usual care, and also in arterial stiffness, both at 12 weeks, but also after the cessation of the exercise training. Okay, I'm not gonna. Just want to briefly mention before we finish about what we do with our dialysis patients. So, has anybody seen, this is not a great picture, anybody seen anybody exercising on dialysis? Yeah? Yeah? So, this is one of the things that we do at King's. We exercise our patients, and we're actually running a big study at the moment. This is a HTA commissioned study where we're looking, it's called PEDAL, and we're looking at intradialytic cycling in terms of quality of life, and we're just about to finish on this, so we'll complete this in June. We've got 380 patients from UK-wide, and so hopefully we'll have some results in terms of how beneficial this is for our hemodialysis patients. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this. So in summary, so we are possibly a little bit further than where you guys are. We're awaiting the outcome from 2 large RCTs in our intradialytic cycling population, and hopefully that will give us some evidence to start commissioning these services for our CKD population. We still need further research in pre-dialysis and kidney transplant patients, and we've got a few studies which are being built up to go in those areas. What I think is really important, and this is one of the messages I'll give when looking at designing of any studies, is to encourage an adequate exercise prescription. And I think it was quite interesting because I think the cardiac rehab study, which just has come out, possibly shows that the difference between having a research study and a research environment and having what is a pragmatic environment in terms of what's actually delivered. And it's really important that what we're doing delivers an adequate exercise prescription. And then I feel quite passionately about individualising exercise training to the patient, and making sure that what you're doing is actually goal-centred and is what the patient wants rather than what we want. Okay, thank you very much.